You're sitting there reading their message again, the same kind of message you've seen 100 times before. It sounds polite on the surface, maybe even caring, but something in you doesn't feel right anymore. You notice the shift in tone, the subtle blame, the way your feelings are being redirected without you realizing it. And for the first time, instead of reacting, instead of explaining yourself, you pause, you say nothing. And that silence, something changes. Not just in you, but in them. Later in this video, I'm going to explain why the moment you stop reacting is the moment they start losing control, and why this shift often makes them act in ways that confuse you even more. I'll also show you the one pattern most empaths fall back into after this realization, the pattern that quietly gives their power away again without them noticing. When you begin to understand how someone communicates beneath the surface, you start to see patterns that were once invisible. You notice how certain conversations always leave you feeling guilty, even when you did nothing wrong. You see how your kindness is met with inconsistency, how your honesty is met with deflection. Before, you may have questioned yourself. You may have wondered if you were overthinking or being too sensitive, but now something inside you has become still and clear. You are no longer reacting from emotion alone. You are observing. This is where everything begins to shift. Because the dynamic you had with this person was not built on your awareness. It was built on your reactions. As long as you responded quickly, explained yourself, and tried to fix the tension, the pattern stayed in place. They could say something confusing and you would work to make sense of it. They could withdraw and you would chase to reconnect. That cycle gave them control, without them even needing to think about it. The moment you understand their language, you stop playing your role in that cycle. And when you stop playing your role, the cycle cannot continue in the same way. Awareness breaks the pattern. That is the spine line you need to remember, because everything that follows comes from this one truth. Awareness breaks the pattern. But this is also where it becomes uncomfortable. Silence starts to appear where there used to be constant communication. You don't respond immediately anymore. You don't rush to fix misunderstandings. You let their words sit without trying to decode or defend. And that silence can feel heavy, especially at the beginning. Your mind may tell you that you're being rude or distant because it's used to keeping things smooth and easy. Silence feels hard because you've been trained to fill every gap with effort. You learn that connection must be maintained, that tension must be resolved quickly, that your role is to keep things stable. So when you choose silence, your nervous system reacts. It feels like you are risking the relationship, but what you are actually doing is creating space for truth to show itself. When you stop rushing to respond, you give yourself time to see clearly, and you give the other person the chance to reveal their real intentions without your interference. Chasing is what used to keep everything together. You chase by asking questions, by clarifying, by trying to make sure nothing was misunderstood. You chase by reaching out when they pulled away, by offering reassurance even when you were the one feeling uncertain. At the time, it felt like love, like care, like commitment. But chasing also lowered your position in a quiet way. It placed you in the role of the one who needs to maintain the connection, while they became the one who decides how much effort to give back. This is not about blame. It's about awareness. Because once you see this pattern, you cannot unsee it. And once you see it, you have a choice. You can continue to chase and keep the dynamic the same, or you can step back and allow the imbalance to become visible. Awareness breaks the pattern. When you stop chasing, the illusion of balance disappears, and what remains is the truth of the connection. You may start to notice things that were always there but felt normal before. You see how often you were the one initiating conversations. You notice how their attention comes and goes, depending on their needs. You recognize how certain words are used to shift responsibility away from them and onto you. This clarity can feel uncomfortable, even painful, because it challenges the way you understood the relationship. At the same time, something else begins to grow inside you. A quiet sense of self-respect. You start to realize that you don't need to respond to everything. You don't need to explain yourself to be understood. You don't need to chase someone to keep them in your life. This realization is not loud or dramatic. It is calm, steady, and deeply grounding. In the next part, we're going to explore what actually happens in their mind when you stop reacting the way you used to, why your silence can make them try harder or pull away even more, and how to handle the urge to go back to old patterns when the discomfort starts to rise. When you step back after understanding the pattern, something subtle but powerful begins to shift. You are no longer feeding the dynamic that kept everything predictable. For a long time, your reactions gave the other person a sense of control. They knew how you would respond. They knew that if they pulled away, you would come closer. If they created confusion, you would try to fix it. That predictability made the relationship easy for them to manage, even if it was exhausting for you. The psychology of stepping back is simple, but its impact is deep. When a pattern is interrupted, the mind looks for ways to restore it. The other person begins to notice that something is different. At first, they may not understand what it is. They might assume you are busy or distracted. But as your silence continues, their attention sharpens. They start to replay conversations looking for clues. They may test the connection by sending a small message, something casual, just to see if you respond the way you used to. This is where their internal shift begins. If they were used to you always reaching out, your absence creates uncertainty, and uncertainty creates focus. They may begin to value your attention more because it is no longer guaranteed, or they may feel a loss of control, especially if they relied on your reactions to maintain their sense of power in the relationship. Awareness breaks the pattern. When you stop reacting, you remove the feedback they were used to, and without that feedback, their usual approach no longer works the same way. Some will respond by trying harder. They might become more attentive, more engaging, even more charming. Not always because they have changed deeply, but because they are trying to reestablish the dynamic they are comfortable with. Others may pull away even more because your new behavior challenges them in a way they are not willing to face. And then there are those who do nothing at all, revealing that their connection to you depended entirely on your effort. Even when you understand this, your own habits do not disappear overnight. The urge to text, to check in, to break the silence can feel strong, especially in moments of loneliness or doubt. Your mind may create reasons to reach out. Maybe they're just busy. Maybe I'm overthinking. Maybe I should just clear the air. But most of the time, that urge is not about clarity. It is about discomfort. You are trying to return to a familiar pattern because it feels safer than the unknown. To handle this, you need to slow yourself down in practical ways. When the urge to reach out appears, pause and give it a name. Is it anxiety, fear, or loneliness? Once you name it, you separate the feeling from the action, then give yourself a delay. Even a few hours can create enough space for the emotional intensity to settle. During that time, do something that grounds you physically. Move your body, go outside, focus on a task that requires your attention. This shifts your state and reduces the urgency of the impulse. Another powerful step is to write the message you want to send, but don't send it. Let your thoughts come out fully without filtering them. You may notice that what you wanted to say was not really about them at all. It was about how you were feeling in that moment. Once those feelings are expressed privately, they lose some of their power over your actions. Awareness breaks the pattern. Each time you choose not to act on impulse, you weaken the old habit and strengthen your self-control. As you step back from chasing, your daily focus needs to change. If you remove your energy from the relationship but leave your mind fixated on it, you will feel stuck. Instead, you need to redirect that energy into your own life. This is where real growth happens. You begin to build routines that support your well-being, not just your relationships. You invest time in your health, your goals, your environment. You start creating a life that feels stable and fulfilling, regardless of who is reaching out to you. You also begin to notice the difference between people who require effort and those who offer consistency. There are always a few individuals in your life who show up without being chased, who communicate clearly, who respect your time and energy. When you shift your focus toward these connections, you start to experience what balance feels like. That experience becomes your new standard, making it easier to recognize when something feels off. This process is not about becoming distant or detached from everyone. It is about becoming intentional. You are no longer giving your energy automatically. You are choosing where it goes and why. Awareness breaks the pattern, and as that awareness deepens, you start to see that the power you thought someone else had over you was actually coming from your own willingness to stay in a cycle that no longer served you. In the next part, we are going to talk about what to do when the silence leads to clear outcomes, how to respond when they come back and try to reconnect, and how to move forward with strength and dignity when they don't. After you step back and allow the pattern to break, you reach a point where the situation becomes clear, something shifts. Either they come back with renewed effort, or they remain distant and the silence stretches longer than you expected. Both outcomes can trigger emotion, but both also carry information that you can use to move forward with clarity instead of confusion. If they come back, it can feel like validation. A part of you may think, finally, they see me, they understand. But this is where your awareness needs to stay active. The return of someone does not automatically mean change. It only means they notice your absence. What matters now is not how quickly you reconnect, but how intentionally you respond. You don't need to ignore them or act distant. You can be calm, respectful, and open, but you must move at a different pace than before. Slowing the pace is not about control. It is about protection. When you respond slowly, when you don't rush back into long conversations or emotional closeness, you give yourself time to observe. You watch whether their effort is consistent or temporary. You notice whether their communication feels clear or still carries the same confusion. You allow actions to speak over time instead of being convinced by one moment of attention. Awareness breaks the pattern. And if you lose that awareness the moment they return, the pattern quietly rebuilds itself. Boundaries become your guide here. Not loud or aggressive boundaries, but calm, steady ones. If they reach out at times that don't work for you, you don't rearrange your life to fit them. If they expect immediate responses, you maintain your own rhythm. If they try to pull you back into old dynamics, you don't engage the same way. These boundaries are not about changing them. They are about changing how you participate. Your standards are shown through your consistency, not your explanations. There is also the possibility that they do not come back at all. This is often the harder path emotionally, because it leaves you without a clear conversation, without a moment of closure. The silence can feel heavy, and your mind may try to fill that silence with doubt. You may wonder if you should have said something, if you were too distant, if you misunderstood the situation. But silence reveals truth either way. If someone can walk away or stay distant without making an effort to reconnect, that is not a mystery you need to solve. It is an answer you need to accept. Closure, in this case, is not something they give you. It is something you choose. You choose to accept that you showed up honestly. You choose to accept that you gave the connection space to breathe. And you choose to accept that the lack of effort on their side is a reflection of their capacity, not your worth. Awareness breaks the pattern, because instead of chasing answers or trying to force understanding, you allow their silence to define the reality of the relationship. Moving forward with dignity means you do not go back to chasing just to relieve the discomfort. You do not send long messages trying to explain everything you feel. You do not shrink yourself again just to recreate a connection that only existed because of your effort. Instead, you redirect your energy. You invest in your own stability, your own routines, your own peace. You strengthen the parts of your life that do not depend on someone else's attention. Let's bring everything together clearly. You learned that understanding their language gave you awareness. That awareness showed you the pattern. When you stepped back, the dynamic shifted. Some people responded, some didn't. And through that process, you saw the truth of each connection. Silence reveals truth either way. It shows you who values you, who misses you, and who was only comfortable when you were the one holding everything together. Your one clear action step is this. The next time you feel the urge to chase, pause and ask yourself one question. Am I acting from clarity or from discomfort? If the answer is discomfort, do nothing. Let the feeling pass. Let the silence exist. That pause is where your power lies. Over time, that single decision will change your patterns more than any explanation ever could. You are not losing control by stepping back. You are gaining it. You are not becoming distant. You are becoming intentional. And the people who truly value you will adjust to that. The ones who don't will fall away, not because you pushed them, but because they were never aligned with the version of you that sees clearly. Stay in that calm, grounded space. You don't need to prove anything. You don't need to chase understanding. Let your actions reflect your self-respect, and let silence do what it was always meant to do. Silence reveals truth either way. And if you're ready to go deeper into how to recognize real effort versus temporary attention, watch the next video where we break down the exact signs that show you who is truly worth your energy and who is not.